Well, howdy folks, Hellcorrex here, and welcome to Mercenary Thoughts from the Inner Sphere, episode 119. And today we're going to be talking about technology. We've already gone through all the clan mechs in the 3050 book, and basically their uses as you fight them, kind of weaknesses and strength depending on which version you're facing, because obviously they run around with lots of pod space. And they also have all these wonderful technology additions that we usually don't see in the Inner Sphere until about 30, 40, when it's kind of like top secret stuff that's been delved from all the secret files and everything that was kind of released from Comstar, because they wanted House Korea to win. But I digress. Okay, so now you're a mercenary pilot, commander, and you need to look at the shopping list of things that you can do to improve your mechs. Now, we talked about the double heat sinks just a while back in a couple episodes, and I always like the double heat sinks for what it can bring, especially if you get into the larger mechs, when you can decrease the number of heat sinks you have. For double heat sinks, that comes with the price of taking up 3 slots if you're Inner Sphere, 2 if you're clan. But clans always have the advantage. Now we're going to be talking about 2 other type of technologies that have been added, which is Endo steel and Ferro-fibrous armor. Now, if you have a whole bunch of existing mechs, Endo steel is not quite an option, because a lot of times that is something that is put or installed from the factory, and doing a field modification is not necessarily an easy thing to do. You got to really tear the mech completely apart and disassemble it and reassemble it, kind of like that movie from the 80s, assemble, disassemble, reassemble. And in case some of you figure that one out, put it down below. The other great thing is they have ferro-fibrous armor, which is basically you take the normal armor and they've, through some type of manufacturing process, created into like a weave where it has a lot like fiber bundles that are mesh, kind of like fiberglass, if you know what that looks like, or any type of cloth. And you're able to put it on your mech, and it takes up more space because it's more bulkier, but it's lighter. Okay. And that can be a great benefit. So if there's anything you can do to help out your mechs, and if you got the space for it, you can always throw on some ferro-fibrous armor. And let's just talk about that for a second here. Now, ferro-fibrous armor, which if we look into the great book of knowledge here, which is on page, I forgot here, gotta go forward, need more, where did they do with it? Battlemech armor, there we go. In page, where's the page number at? 56 of the tech manual, which is the Battletech Classic Tech Manual, page 56. The wonderful thing about it is just look at the 2 things right off the bat. Standard armor is like, for 1 ton you get 16 armor points for every ton that you put on your mech. So if you're looking at your typical mech, let's say let's bring up something here, Locust, which is your 7 or 812 with no jump jets, is roughly gonna have 3 tons left over. Now if you put on ferro-fibrous armor, you get 2.5 tons, and if you put ferro-fibrous armor on it, you're going to end up with 3 tons. Okay, just keep that in mind. Which is roughly, you're going to end up with 69 points of armor, which is maxed out. So you're running around the mech with maximum armor. You can do some things like add your weapons on there and use like a 1/2 ton typically, and give yourself another 1/2 ton of weapon space. Okay. Now, so That is in itself, with the 69, you take that by 16, you're going to end up with 4 tons of armor. So 4 tons of your mech is taken up by armor alone, and that's at 16 points a piece. Now, with the wonderful thing about Ferro-fibrous armor, which you give in around the 3050 era, is that with the inner sphere you put on Ferro-fibrous armor, it takes up 14 crit slots. Okay, your typical Battlemech here, it's like if you look at the this Locust, a standard 30-25 Locust, has 29 open slots. Could be 31 if you remove the hand actuators or lower actuators. So actually you could add 4 more on there if you wanted to, so that's 33. Okay. Now, with the Ferro-fibrous armor will take up 14 of those slots. So obviously you're looking at that, geez, I got plenty of room. You're right. That isn't counting that you're going to be throwing on some probably medium, let's say 4 medium lasers on there. That's going to decrease your amount of armor. But the wonderful thing about Ferro-fibrous armor is that it multiplies the tonnage that you have and gives you more, wait for it, armor spots or armor points. So with the inner sphere, you get 12% more armor. So you take your armor value that you have, which is 4, let's say 4 tons, multiply that by 1.2, and you go from having 2.5 tons of open spot to, if you put the Ferro-fibrous on, now you have 3. So you gained yourself a half a ton. Okay, that half ton could be used for more weapons. It could put jump jets, etc. It depends on the mech. So if you already have jump jets on it, then you can add more on it. Okay, that's the wonderful thing about it. Now the clans have a bigger advantage. They have a multiplier 1.2. So you take your armor value, multiply it by 1.2. So they get a 20% increase, and it only costs them 7 slots. All right. So we'll get into the other thing where we're going to talk about Endo steel. So obviously with the inner sphere, a lot of times you're stuck with choosing either Endo steel or Ferro-fibrous. Now if you have mechs that are just being field upgraded, you're going with the Ferro-fibrous, because if you got a mech, let's say a quick draw or something of that nature, that doesn't have a lot of armor to begin with, or you're looking at that, you put Ferro-fibrous armor on it, you get 12% more points, so you're going to increase your armor value by roughly, I think it is like 16 or 18 or something like that, somewhere in there. That could be the difference between getting punched through for 1 turn, and it really doesn't cost you much more. It might cost you a couple 100,000 more C-bills if you're looking at cost-wise in the game. Now, that's one thing to look at. Now, the biggest thing is that Ferro-fibrous is more beneficial the more armor points you have. Okay, so if you get into some of the heavy, light, mediums and heavies and assault mechs, and you put Ferro-fibrous on it, you can gain more tonnage, obviously, because the more tonnage you use for armor, the more the multiplier is, and the more you're going to get the benefit out of it, so you're going to save yourself more space. Okay, which you can turn into either more heat sinks, more ammo, etc. Or you can just throw it all right into, the tonnage goes right into more armor to begin with, so you even increase your survivability even more, because the longer you can last before they get your juicy inner parts, your internal structure, the longer you're going to be last on the battlefield. Okay. Now, clan, well, obviously, they're going to typically, a good clan mech, a well-designed one, typically has Ferro-fibrous and Endo steel on it, because if they have the space for it, that's only 14 that's being taken up. They're going to be having some great benefits from it. Now, let's just delve over to back on page internal structure. you're looking at on page 47 of the tech manual. So if you get a mech that comes right out of the factory, and they got the new technology of Endo steel, which is a lighter alloy that lightens the mech up. So suddenly you have a mech that is lighter. So if you have a, let's say a Locust comes across off the tech line, and it suddenly, it's like, all right, we want to give it Endo steel. That cost you as an Intersphere mech 14 crit slots. Okay, that's okay, not a big deal, because this is a mech that has lots of space on it to begin with, because it has a tendency to not use everything, so you can take advantage of it. Now if I have my druthers of what I would prefer first as a mech, always pick the Endo steel, because that gives you the more bang for your buck between Ferro-fibrous and Endo steel. And what it does is it cuts your tonnage in half. It's like a typical Locust internal structure. It's a 20-ton mech, so its internal structure is 2. So 2 tons of your 20 tons is taken up by your internal structure, which is your frame. It's like your skeleton, like you have when you're walking around, if you don't know that. If you use Endo steel, it only takes up 1 ton. So you cut your tonnage in half. Remember, we talked about a Ferro-fibrous on a Locust typically gives you a half a ton benefit. The Endo steel, on the other hand, gives you a full ton benefit. So if you're able to combine the Endo steel and the Ferro-fibrous together, because you don't have a lot of ability to put a lot of weapons on, because you're a scout mech, let's say like the Locust, suddenly you're sitting with 4 crit or tonnages left over, so you're looking at a mech that can put, let's say, 4 medium lasers on it. Alright, and have maximum armor. Or you could even toss in, let's say, there's the one that has the four small lasers. You could turn around and give it the jump jets. Okay, so it gives it some ability to maneuver even better over top of terrain and stuff like that. It's your mech. If you are a mercenary commander and you're able to play with things a little bit, okay, you can do that. Typically, I like to prefer a little bit more weapons, upgrade the weapon systems that are existing to even some better weapons, etc. Now, if you get into your typical mech, which is, let's say, the only downside is let's say you're looking at any type of mech that is on the 5s. You're looking at 25 a 25-ton mech. It basically only gains a half a ton benefit out of it, because you don't get a quarter tonnage out of it for Intersphere. Now, you know, it just says basically you're not going to be able to take advantage of it on any mech that's on the 5s. You basically going to have the same amount of tonnage saving as the next level above. So a 35-ton mech has only the savings of a 40-ton mech, so 2. Okay, so a 30.5 ton internal structure is still only a savings of 2. So you save, you know, roughly a ton and a half. Okay, that's still tonnage that you're saving. But if I, like I said, if I had my druthers, what I'd rather have on my mech is I always go Endo steel and then Ferro-fibrous. Now the problem is when you get into some of the heavier mechs, you know, you start getting up into the mediums and stuff, it gets really dicey about the amount of space you're going to have available to toss on extra weapons. Because if you look at the let's say, let's rip this thing up to a 50-ton mech. All right, 50-ton mech. What is 50-ton mech? We got the Enforcer. let's say the Enforcer. Now the Enforcer, we just go look at their weapons here. All right, standard and Endo steel, got rid of that. Okay, so standard Enforcer, which is a 460 mech, has 20.5 tons of space able to use, and then you have 45, and then you have 169 points of armor. That's it's maxed out. Now if we put on Endo steel, we get 2.5 more tons, so we're up to 23, and if you put Ferro-fibrous on it, you're looking at 24.5 tons of space that you can throw on a mech. Suddenly you're looking at a mech that has the amount of space available similar to what you got in the clan mechs, but it's slower. That's the reason why. You could, let's say you jump it up to a 5.8 like a trebuchet, throw some jump jets on it. Now you're just looking at 17. So you still could put your LRM-15s on it and some medium lasers, but that's the big difference, is that you can do that. So that but you're looking at losing out on the available crit slots that you have. So if you get rid of the jump jets, which it doesn't have, you're looking at 19 points of internal structure available. And you're a 580, you have 19.5 tons available pod space. Not really pod space, we're talking clans. Got clans on the brain. But you got 19 crit slots available to throw into weapons. Now let's say one of those you're able to put on your 2 LRM-15s with some more ammo. You can throw in double heat sinks because you're a 5.8. You're able to handle a 10 on the engine, if I believe. Let me check real quick. Yep, you can throw all 10 on. So you dissipate 20 heat. You have a really good mech then. So you're looking at a mech that has could throw out a lot of firepower downrange, because you're looking at something that has 19.5 tons of weapons, and you can turn that trebuchet into a really decent fire support mech. So if you go into like the missiles, a couple LRM-15s, and we throw on 4 tons of ammo, add that on, we still got 2.5 tons left over. I know it has some energy weapons. Let's go with some medium lasers. We can throw 3 of those on. Add, you're looking at something that has 2 LRM-15s, 3 medium lasers. Most heat it does is 19. If it runs, it goes to 21. So it can dissipate almost everything it has. That in itself is how much of a benefit you get. And then when you're facing the clans, let's say a lot of this technology is being released in 3050. So by 3055, almost everybody has access to all this stuff. So the discrepancy between the clans and the inner sphere has been shortened. So you get better weapon systems, you got better mechs, and you're able to handle those fights a little bit better in a head-to-head combat. So that is the one thing that's the greatest benefit between having Endo steel and Ferro-fibrous. It adds just that little bit more of equipment. So you add in like the heat sinks, Endo steel and Ferro-fibrous. You can turn some of these light and medium mechs into your beast mode. You know, you have something that has a lot of weapon systems on it. Let's say you look at a 60 tonner, which is, let's say, a quick draw. We were talking about a quick draw earlier. Even a you had let's see, just without changing anything, I'm just looking at, we got a 580 60-ton mech with double heat sink. Still has a 2 LRM-15s, 3 medium lasers, and it still has an extra half ton of weapon space or equipment space you could throw on here. So you could even add another, say, add another medium laser And roughly all it costs you to add another medium laser is 4 points of armor, because you got the Ferro-fibrous on there, which is giving you that multiplier. So by cutting down on the amount of tonnage you're throwing towards armor, but it's still multiplied. So like I was telling you, get more benefit from having Ferro-fibrous the more tonnage you have. Okay, so now it has 197 points armor, which is really respectable for a 60-ton mech. You got 2 LR15s and 4 medium lasers. Okay, so it has something to protect itself when it gets in closer. So that is the benefits that you're going to have with using Endo steel and Ferro-fibrous on your mechs when it gets to later in the game. It's something to think about. If you're playing campaigns, the first thing you can always do is add slabs of Ferro-fibrous armor plastered onto your mech. That's the one field change that you can do. It's a field modification. Because when you're going into the field and you're fighting a battle, the armor is going to get stripped off. Your mechanics are able to just cut that off and replace it all. So they can do that type of thing in the field. That's something they do all the time, is replace armor. The Endo steel is a wholly different matter. That means you got to have some type of gantry that you're able to totally rip apart your mech and then rebuild it from the scratch, from ground up, literally. And that is a big difference. So that is something that's not really a field modification. So if you're playing campaigns, field modifications, Ferro-fibrous. If you're able to order something from the factory, right off the assembly line, yeah, go with the Endo steel if they're able to get it. Or if you're able to get the materials to build the Endo steel, shipped to you, then do the modification someplace in some cantonment area where you're behind the lines or of that nature, where you can rebuild a mech. So that's some thoughts, things you can think about when it comes to those two types of technology. All right, we'll be moving on to some other goodies later on. Maybe we'll start into some of those 3050 and Inner Sphere mechs and looking at the builds that are in the 3050 book and maybe what I would do to possibly change them. So if there's anything in the 3050 book, any mechs particularly of those you want to have me go over, I can jump on those in order as they come in, and then I'll just start going down the line that's in the book. All right, let me know what your thoughts are, and we will talk with you later. Elcrags out.